Okay, thank you everyone for joining us for this briefing to the Land Use, Transportation, and Public Safety Committee. This is a briefing on Purple Line construction and pedestrian safety. I appreciate everyone's time in joining us this afternoon. The way I'd like to hold this briefing is I'd like to start with a brief overview by Delegate Charkoudian to set the stage for some of our members who may not be as involved with some of these issues. And then I understand and appreciate MDOT has a presentation for about half an hour, and then we'll open it up for questions from members. So with that, Delegate Charkoudian, please set the stage for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues, friends from MDOT, and everyone who's following along at home. I wanted to give just a brief overview, and I'm sure that my colleagues in District 20 who are on the committee and others who have districts that are along the Purple Line will be able to add to this later after the presentation. But just to create some context, I will speak for myself first and many of my colleagues in saying that I am thrilled that the Purple Line is being built. Disappointed that it's as far behind schedule as it is, but glad that it's picking up again, and really look forward to having it as the really important transit infrastructure in our community. At the same time, we need to be very mindful of and careful about the communities that it goes through and the implications for those communities, making sure that they're being cared for while the construction is ongoing, and especially with all the delays that we've had with it. There's a number of issues that we've worked on over the years related to small business support and other things, but one of the issues that we're seeing as a growing concern is pedestrian safety during the Purple Line construction. These are communities that already had areas, and when I think about University Boulevard in particular, Piney Branch, they were already areas that were very dangerous for pedestrians. And the Purple Line construction has complicated those factors and made those dangerous areas even more dangerous. I have been in conversation with many of the people who are here from MDOT over the last several years on these issues, as have my colleagues from District 20 and probably colleagues in other parts of the district. I'll just give a couple of examples of things that we have seen repeatedly in our district.
Some documents, okay.
Sorry. Oh, Senator Lee, I think you're.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me mute myself.
Yeah, no worries.
Please excuse me.
That's okay. So I'll briefly go over, we've had sidewalks closed with no advanced warning. We've had sidewalks and bus stops closed with no indication if the bus stop itself is closed. We've had both sidewalks closed at the same time, sometimes both by MTA Purple Line permit, sometimes one side MTA, the other side SHA. We've had both sidewalks closed in consecutive sections with no safe crossing in between. We've had sidewalks closed with no detours, and the safe crossing alternative is a half a mile or a mile out of the way. We've had signage and construction debris blocking sidewalks, making it difficult for those with mobility challenges or strollers to use an already narrow sidewalk. Temporary patching that lasts for weeks or months, making the sidewalk difficult to navigate, and there's more. In response to raising these issues, generally when I've raised them, I will say that often MDOT and MTA and SHA, depending on the agency that's responsible, is often responsive and attempts to correct the issue. However, the problem is that it shouldn't take state delegates getting involved to have a safe passageway. And often it takes 24 hours for the issue to be addressed. And during that time, people's lives are in danger as they're walking in the streets. And so the request that's been made to MDOT is, especially as we expect that the Purple Line construction is going to ramp up, and that's great because we all want the Purple Line, but is that there be a more structured plan in place that really takes care of and ensures pedestrian safety throughout this process. And that be really a comprehensive and systematic plan, one that while it's important to have people that the community can call in response to an issue that falls through the cracks, that should not be the plan. Call us if you see a problem. The plan should be one that really prevents these things from happening. And so I'm grateful that MDOT has started on that process. I'm hopeful that the presentation that we get today really it demonstrates a comprehensive plan. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to hear more about the plan, ask some questions and hear the comments and questions from my colleagues as we all work to make sure that everyone is as safe as possible as we build this very important piece of infrastructure in our communities. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll pass it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Delegate Charkoudian. And I will hand it over, I guess, Melissa, to you for your team, or whomever from MDOT is going to take it away. Thank you.
Yep, Sean, go ahead. You're good to start.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Excuse me. Good afternoon, Chair Love, Vice Chair Acevero, and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Sean Powell, Deputy Secretary of the Maryland Department of Transportation. Now, we're here today to discuss pedestrian access throughout the Purple Line construction area. I have with me today Ray Biggs, the project director on the MTA Purple Line team, Derek Gunn, acting district engineer at SHA's District 3 office, and Dave Abrams, the Purple Line Communications Director, and also you see Melissa Einhorn from our state legislative office. I'm sure many, if not all of you, are familiar with the team, but they are outstanding to work with. As it was noted in the invitation for the briefing, the Purple Line team and SHA have been working with Delegate Charkoudian on these issues related to pedestrian safety, and I just want to assure everyone that safety has been and continues to be the top priority at MDOT, not just for these projects, but across all of our modes. While MDOT has robust plans and utilizes best practices related to pedestrian safety, we do always welcome feedback and recognize that work is never done when it comes to keeping people safe. The Purple Line team and SHA work closely to not only react to issues, but mitigate issues when feasible. I know one of the issues we're going to discuss today is related to utility operations and coordination. MDOT does recognize that this is important not only for the Purple Line project, but for all of our projects, both large and small. In July, MDOT and Secretary Ports convened a very productive summit with utility companies where we discussed issues such as coordination and communication, issues that aren't unique to MDOT or any specific project, but by bringing everyone together and facilitating open lines of communication, we are committing to ensure that all of our partners recognize that safety is a top priority. I don't want to steal Ray and Derek's thunder, so with that, I'm happy to turn it over to them so they can dive into the details about exactly what their teams are doing to mitigate and resolve pedestrian access on the Purple Line and project. And we're going to kick it over to Ray. So Ray, you now have the floor.
All right, thank you, Sean. So good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Chairman, Chairwoman, and the Vice Chair and members of the committee. So for the record, my name is Ray Biggs. As Sean mentioned, I'm the project director for MDOT's MTA's Purple Line project. I am here to provide an update on the project, particularly as it relates to pedestrian safety. I actually come from a safety background from my previous role back when I was at FTA as the Safety Division Chief for Safety Risk Management and Assurance. Before I move on, I wanted to recognize and extend our team's appreciation to Delegate Laura Charkoudian for her ongoing and respectful collaboration. We've had many meetings. We actually met out in person on the first day of school. It was my first time actually getting to meet her as we ensure some safety going out there on the first day of school out there for the students during the Purple Line construction. I would also like to thank the rest of the delegation for your support of this project and commitment to safety. I prepared a short presentation outlining some of the issues and some of the concerns that have been brought up since I've come on board. I know these have been some ongoing issues prior to me even coming on board about 2 months ago, but we want to make sure that we address these issues, in particular the safety along Wayne Avenue area in our alignment. So let's take a look at Wayne Avenue. So as I mentioned, we were pleased to be out there the first day of school with the delegate and helping with the conditions as children's safety travel to and from school that day. And we continue to have a presence at that location today. This morning, actually, I got an update from my construction managers about our ambassadors that were out there helping to do the flagging and all of that as the students were going to class and crossing the different cross sections. As you can see here at Dale Drive and Wayne Avenue, that is that main intersection that crosses that is the main cross section there with the school. I should mention that in April, we brought on our new design builder, Maryland Transit Solutions, on board. Construction is ramping up from New Carrollton to Bethesda, and we are excited to share progress with you going forward. Wayne Avenue in particular will be a significant pressure point as we continue relocation of sewer and telecommunications, followed by the installation of stormwater pipe replacement of the Sligo Creek Bridge, and eventually widening of the Wayne Avenue by our contractor. That's where we'll start to see a lot of that coordination and a lot of safety, where we have to do a lot of focusing on the safety and making sure those sidewalks are in place and making sure we look out for the children. So some of the challenges, as I mentioned, I wanted to take a look at these. So that we face on Wayne Avenue in particular, as you know, it's a challenging location for construction work because it's a densely populated near a school on a fairly small roadway. We take pedestrian safety very seriously on the Purple Line and with MDOT. And we are committed to working with you to focus on the priority as we deliver the Purple Line to Maryland. So as you can see, some of the items here, this is a picture of the crews working on utility relocation on Wayne Avenue. And as I mentioned, this is really just to talk a little bit about those challenges that we have. So of course, we are here today to brief you on our process to meet our goal of pedestrian safety, as Delegate Charkoudian mentioned. And utility relocations require constant adjustments as we are going across construction on this project. As anyone who lives in this neighborhood knows, we are boring through this dense rock to replace a sewer line that is located right under the sidewalk on the south side of Wayne Avenue. Our crews are required to maintain safe pedestrian access to detour people safely around the work zone. Often that has to be done with few good options for safe crossings to choose from, just because of how it's laid out across Wayne Avenue. However, we do want to ensure that we attend to the safety. So finally, third parties like utility subcontractors are required to notify MDOT, SHA, safety, the State Highway Administration when they need to perform work on the Purple Line alignment. So sometimes they fail to do so, but we have now implemented some double checks where we have inspectors and other staff monitoring the work zone to watch out for that, starting first thing in the morning before the construction actually begins, to make sure that all of the requirements and everyone is meeting the safety requirements we have outlined. So what is the action plan? This is a summary of the action plan that we actually have put into place over the past 2 months. I mentioned earlier, I've been here as of today now 2 months on the project as the project director. And we have had several meetings and discussions with the delegate after she reported the sidewalk being closed on both sides, as she mentioned, on Wayne Avenue, when a Verizon subcontractor performed work without notifying anyone in advance. At the delegate's request, we developed an action plan to avoid this happening again. And then in July, we actually had a utility summit with Secretary Port, where many issues were discussed, including coordination of work by various parties with all of the utilities. We continue to do that coordination where we have now individual meetings with each of the utility companies, the construction managers that we have, where we actually walk through and make sure that we are coordinating these schedules to make sure that we, at all possible, to avoid any conflicts, try to be proactive so that we don't have the issues and actually be able to resolve those conflicting schedules before the work actually begins. We also remind our partners of requirements to obtain permits, as we've reminded with the utility companies, and we are installing additional signage at key points along the alignment, letting customers know that no matter what the issue is, the Purple Line outreach staff will research and rectify issues customers face to face and as soon as possible. So continuing on, before I take questions and before we move on and I pass it over to Derek from SHA, I want to review our operations from the first day of school. As I mentioned in the beginning, where we were out there, as you can see, me, the executive director, Delegate Charkoudian, one of our main construction managers, Mike, and then also we have the MTS, we have the communications team and everyone out there too that was out there on the first day. Some of the things that I want to review is that we had our ambassadors out on Wayne Avenue because of its unique situation That's the ambassador here in that top photo, also known as a flagger. And we have adjusted our hours in front of the school so that work is not occurring when students are walking to and from school. As you can see, it's from 9 to 3. And we execute a robust outreach strategy that included text messages to every parent at the schools, as well as text notifications to our subscribers and social media posts that included a detour map. So this concludes my portion. I will actually pass it over to Derek, who will actually go over some of the SHA work and the coordination that we've been doing and coordination across Purple Line, and also to implement and look into some of the safety concerns we have. Derek?
Hey, Ray, this is Sean, and Madam Chair, I believe that Derek is having a few little issues getting in. So if you want to pivot the questions for Ray while we have him, and then we can get Derek on, that would be okay.
Sure. Is that on our end or on Derek's end?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
No one is currently in the waiting room, but I'm happy to assist if anyone needs to shoot me an email.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, while we're waiting, do members have questions so far? Delegate Corman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know, this might be for the Deputy Secretary. When did construction start on the Purple Line?
You mean initial construction? Off the top of my head, sir, I don't recall.
Okay, August of 2017, sound like a familiar date?
Possibly.
Okay, and what was the original construction schedule? How long was it supposed to take?
That I will have to get back to you on. I don't have it in front of
Does
me.
5 years sound about right?
I will get back to you, sir.
Yeah, no, so those are the actual answers. And I guess my concern is that we should be at the end of this project. And the stuff that's being described, which all sounds very good. I mean, I'm happy to hear about all the collaboration and the responsiveness to Delegate Charkoudian's concerns. I mean, it should have been happening at best, at worst, 4 years ago, and certainly not in year 5 of construction. So I'm just wondering if there's any kind of lessons learned or explanation. I mean, how can we avoid, someday if you're, then the next project comes along, how is MDOT going to avoid a repeat of, these problems?
So, I mean, I can say that we always look at issues and we do a lessons learned from every project. And Ray, I'm sure that that's what's going to be happening moving forward with Purple Line and SHA. So, and any other project we do around the state. So lessons learned is also a practice that we do. So yes, we will use lessons learned moving forward.
Okay, well, we're 5 years in. So do you have any lessons that you've learned or that your department has learned?
I don't have a list here in front of me, sir, but I'll be happy to get back to you.
Okay. And this might be for if I could ask a follow-up, Madam Chair.
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, I think this might be for MTA, or maybe we need to wait for SHA, but I know there was a access permit that was pending for southbound 355 through Delegate Chair Love's district and my district. Do you know if that's been approved by SHA yet and what the status of that lane closure is? Mr. Biggs, I think maybe you can't answer, maybe we need the district engineer.
Yes, I will have to defer to Derek on that one.
Okay, so you don't know the status of the MTA or the Purple Line concessionaire's requested lane closure and sidewalk closure?
It's still pending. I know we're working on it. So I will have to get back to you as far as if you want a date on that.
Great. Well, I can ask the district engineer when he arrives. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Corman. Delegate Moon, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess just, while we're waiting for Mr. Gunn, I did want to just double back on some very general perspective things. The last few times we've had this kind of a conversation, it's been because of things slipping through the cracks. So this is a legitimate question. It's not one of these devil's advocate questions, but as we move through the concessionaire picking up and the state sort of taking seemingly on paper a greater oversight responsibility given what's happened, I mean, this general question is who's between the concessionaire and the state? I'm curious, who are the individual human beings that are supposed to be in charge of sort of proactively overseeing both the pedestrian safety issues that we're flagging here and the small business outreach, which is just another whole topic that I want to put a pin on maybe for the end of this meeting, because I recall in the original iteration of this project, we were constantly told to deal with the concessionaire when it came to these things, and no one wanted to do anything that was seemingly out of contract scope. But as we can see now, there are very basic items that are getting missing. Again, pedestrian safety and small business are two I would flag overall. So I guess is it Derek and Mr. Powell? I just want to know who is sort of taking responsibility for the oversight of these two elements at this moment.
I actually can answer that question. So actually, with our P3 agreement, MTA, PLTP, MTS are all working together to coordinate in regards to how we do communication outreach. And there's a collectiveness across the three groups involved in how we do all of this to respond to the safety, and we know how to alert the teams immediately to address it. So that's something that we're doing every day. We just recently had a meeting in regards to that to actually work the details of that out, and we have a plan of how we're moving that forward. And we have our own staff that actually go out and check this from MTA's point, in addition to MTS having their staff that are out there too.
Madam Chair, if I could just ask
Right ahead.
for a little bit of clarity on that. I mean, part of what I worry about is that the reason why things have been slipping through the cracks, it was originally a dodge the responsibility by pushing it on the concessionaire, but sort of management and oversight by group and committee seems highly problematic, given exactly what we're talking about. So we don't have to answer this here, but I would appreciate if somehow through the process you create, it does lead to clarity as to who's in charge of this, a person or at least a single office, so that we're not having to duck and weave between the multiple entities involved.
Yeah, let me clarify there. So MTA is the oversight. So we do the oversight of MTS as the owner. So we do the oversight of their work to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. What I meant by the collaboration is that we're working together to make sure that they notify us, or we also make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do as the contractor.
Got it. So just to put this perfectly clearly, MTA is taking MTA is taking responsibility for when these things slip through the cracks.
We are responsible for the oversight of the project.
Okay. All right. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Moon. I understand Mr. Gunn is here. Delegate Tarkoudian, would you like to ask your question now or wait?
Thank you. I think I do have questions that probably make sense after the SHA presentation, but I just had one question that goes to the, I think it's MTA, because the set of solutions that you walked through didn't address at all the debris in sidewalks, as well as the repaving of sidewalks and the length of time that they are, for all intents and purposes, inaccessible for somebody with mobility issues, somebody with a stroller, somebody in a wheelchair, across. And this isn't just Wayne Avenue. I mean, I appreciate that you all have paid attention there because it's a school zone, but people also walk to school along University, Piney Branch. That's just my district. There's of course all the rest of the Purple Line construction, and some in Delegate Solomon's district, and there's his hand. So in all of those areas, we have places where the sidewalk just is essentially inaccessible to anybody who, kind of can't walk an obstacle course. And so just that piece of this has not been addressed And I think that that's kind of the MTA piece. I'll save my other questions for after Derek presents.
I guess I can respond to that. In regards to, yes, that is something that we do actually look at on a weekly basis as far as working with our design builder and all of that to coordinate the maintenance of traffic and all of that. So that's where those discussions get held, where we actually look at those different areas to make sure that we're maintaining the sidewalks and all of that, as you mentioned, Delegate.
Okay, sorry, Madam Chair, can I ask a follow-up question?
Go right ahead.
I guess the question is, so in your book, how long is it acceptable to have a sidewalk that's essentially inaccessible to anybody who has challenges related to mobility?
Well, we should always keep sidewalks available for ADA as required by our standards and all of that. And Derek will go through all of that as how we reroute and do that to make sure that we have accessibility. So we will make sure that we keep the sidewalks accessible at all times.
Okay, I'm not sure what to do with the fact that they're not. Like, I mean, like for extended periods of time, the patching on them essentially makes them not ADA compliant. In addition to signage that is on the, like we'll block it and those kinds of things, but the patching alone that has been sort of the status quo for several weeks, I can't imagine it's ADA compliant.
Yes, if you can provide some examples, and this is, I know that I'm a little new here, so of where that has been happening, I can actually look into it and I can actually work with our team to make sure that they are compliant, where we can go through and address those and make sure that it's addressed going forward. Because one thing that I want to make sure we do, as you mentioned in the beginning, is to be proactive about this and not wait till it becomes an issue.
Right.
Charcudian, we do have other members with some questions, so I'm going to jump in. We have Delegate Wilkins and then Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks so much to the presenters. Welcome, Mr. Biggs. I have not had the opportunity to meet you yet, but very much appreciate the work that you're doing. I just wanted to surface something that I think is coming up through a lot of the questions and discussion, and that's particularly with this sort of now restart that we're in, is who is responsible for what and where and how the oversight is taking place. And I think that there needs to be some sort of updated document, org chart, something that is really helping us to understand how the oversight is taking place, who to contact and things like that. So I just want to surface that and request, Mr. Powell, if that's something that you are able to update, share with us, that would be something that would be very helpful. And Mr. Biggs, my question for you is, I understand, and I think that your response was very quick and very helpful with Delegate Charcuti in terms of being on site in the first day of school and working to create an action plan. What are the mechanisms for the public who, they may just go online and just Google Purple Line if they see an issue, or Purple Line pedestrian safety or other problems? So since this is a public briefing, what are the ways that we are able to, or for the public that's listening, able to report those situations, the misses that we have, the pedestrian safety issues, who may not go through their elected official, but might see something and need to be able to report it?
Okay, I'll address the first part of your question. Yes, we'll be, as I mentioned, it's a new chapter of the Purple Line as we're restarting, as you can say, to make sure we get to that revenue service state. And we'll be happy to provide an org chart of showing how we are actually structured. As I mentioned to, I believe it's David Moon, in regards to who is responsible for the oversight, that is MTA. We're responsible for the oversight, but we can definitely provide that org chart to make sure it gets shared. In regards to outreach, you can report things through either email or our hotline that we have. They are available via the website that we have for the Purple Line project. And also, you also can find out things that are happening via Twitter, where our communication team sends out tweets in regards to things that are going on, and also provides information as to how to get to all the different means of how to communicate things to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Wilkins. Delegate Solomon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for coming on a couple of minutes late, but appreciate the folks from MDOT, MTA, and Purple Line Partners who are here. I have two, what I hope are relatively quick questions. I guess the first question that I've got is, and again, I apologize if this was covered earlier. I think one of the biggest pedestrian safety issues that we have in our part of the alignment right now has to do with the Sleaford Road underpass. I was curious if anybody from the team can give us an update. I know that was slated to be completed. We have a high school that's pretty near to the underpass, and I've already heard from a number of parents asking for an update.
Okay. It was good to see you, Delegate Solomon. I think that might have been my first meeting with the public when I went out there, where we had to address some of the issues happening in regards to some safety there. We were able to do sort of a quick turnaround response on that, because yes, we were definitely listening and responding to you. We intend to open the Sleaford underpass this fall. We are currently working on installing the stairs, and should be by the end of October for Sleaford underpass.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, if you can send maybe a specific date or any other information, that would be really helpful. I know that's something our community has been pressing on, and I appreciate some of the immediate changes that happened over in the Jones Bridge intersection. I know that's an ongoing concern that we're working on with you all, and as well with the county. And I guess my other question is really directed squarely at MDOT, as you all have oversight over this. And I know some of the Purple Line folks are probably going to laugh when I ask this, but the other major issue that we have in our alignment is, and really, I think the number one concern over a lot of the pedestrian safety issues in our stretch is the closure of the Capitol Crescent Trail. And obviously, to Delegate Corman's point, should be just about open by now. And we had received a commitment publicly from the previous CEO of the Purple Line Partners. I guess this was now almost 3 years ago in 2019, publicly stating that as soon as the construction on the train line was done and the line was moved into testing, that the trail would reopen. I think I've asked this now at almost every public meeting that I've been to. I have not gotten any commitment from anybody that original statement is going to be honored. I've gotten we'll have to see how construction is going to progress. We don't want to open it and then have to close it if we need access to the track. Obviously, the train is going to be under testing for potentially up 9 to 12 months, where all of the construction on the trail will be finished. So I don't want to hear from the Purple Line folks. I want to hear from MDOT, who has oversight over the construction. Can we have a commitment that original statement from the CEO will be honored, that the trail will be open earlier than the train line to the community as quickly as possible?
Well, thank you, Delegate Solomon. And I'm not going to make that commitment. I think we have to see how things are going. As you know, we were put behind on the construction process basically because of a lawsuit from the Capitol Crescent Trail regarding that.
Well, I just want to interrupt you. This statement was made after all of the lawsuits were done. This was a statement that was made that while the line was in testing, the trail would be open. So that has nothing to do with it. I mean, there's a million different reasons why we're 5 years behind, not the least of which to say the state's poor oversight. So I just want to make that clear. That has nothing to do with the lawsuit over the trail. That was in 2019 after all of that was settled. Public statement of the CEO of the partnership.
Okay. Well, we now have obviously new players in the game. I'm not going to make a commitment. We're not going to sit here and make a commitment. We're going to stay to what you recently said. We have to see how things are going, and we will open, when it is feasible to open or allow it to be open.
Well, and the last thing I want to say is I think that's part of the frustration that many of our constituents and folks in our community, we received commitments from folks years ago at this point, and those commitments are not being honored. And so I think your team has a long way to go to make sure that our community feels like the trust can be restored and can be honored. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Solomon. Why don't we move on to Mr. Gunn?
Thank you, Delegate Love. And before I start my presentation, the M.SHA portion, I just want to say I apologize profusely for logging in a little bit late. I did have some technical difficulties, but I appreciate being here with the committee and getting a chance to present state highway perspective. This says Maryland 594A Wayne Avenue, and that's just, it's kind of indicative of what we've been speaking about, but I understand that there's corridors outside of Wayne Avenue that we could easily transpose here. Next slide, please. This is just a little bit of a table of contents, what I'll be speaking about this afternoon. The permit process, Maryland Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, Maryland Book of Standards, and then some activity that we have deployed along Wayne Avenue. Hopefully that's emblematic of our commitment to safety along these corridors. Next slide, Ray. Okay, we sent some information a little bit earlier, but this is about a blanket permit and a specific permit, but just wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about the utility permit process and some of the pedestrian and bicycle language that's embedded in those in that process. For a utility permit, essentially what we're asking is for them to maintain safe pedestrian and bicycle access to the work zones for all permits, and then try to the maximum extent feasible if they're not able to do that. I want to touch a little bit about the timeline for public notifications, which was not met with the Wayne Avenue case. Standard permits require pre-construction meetings, and that's when our utility inspector sits down with the contractor and they kind of go over the logistics of that particular project. Usually permittees are required to submit a lane closure permit, and that's supplemental to the actual utility permit. The lane closure permit essentially outlines some of the specifics related to the traffic control, how many lanes will be closed, the duration, the hours, and so forth. And that's required to be submitted almost several days prior to the lane closure going into effect, 72 hours to be exact. Now, these guidelines do not necessarily apply to emergency work, but even in that event, the contractor is supposed to contact our SOC, our State Operations Center, and let them know about the forthcoming work. And again, that was not done with Wayne Avenue either. And then prior to commencement of any activities, the contractor is supposed to notify our utility permit inspector. That utility permit inspector usually traverses the corridor and kind of takes a look at activity along the work zone just to make sure that things are going as planned. And that also was not done on Wayne Avenue. Next slide, please, Roy.
Mr. Gunn?
Yes.
I'm going to take the chair's prerogative and jump in right here before we leave that slide. Do you have any enforcement mechanism, and what happens? Because you said a couple of times that these things didn't happen with Wayne Avenue. So when the permits aren't, submitted or they're not followed, what authority do you have?
Thank you for that question, Delegate. I can walk through the process a little bit, and I'll use Wayne Avenue as an example. Our utility inspector, if the permittee is not following, I guess, our standards essentially for pedestrian and bicycle safety, usually our utility permit inspector will reach out. They'll contact that parent facility, utilities or what have you, and have a conversation and say, look, we were on site and these conditions are not being met. We give them an opportunity to correct what's ever not up to specs. And if that doesn't happen, the permit could be revoked, or what could happen is we could assist the work in the work zone.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Roy. Okay, so what does the work zone look like? Typically, there's a few different scenarios. I'll focus on two, and these are based on federal guidance for how to treat work zones in certain areas. So the first one is a sidewalk detour, and that's essentially what's in play for much of the Purple Line corridors that we'll be speaking about. In this case, there's some advanced signage. You can see that in the arms, the road work ahead. That's at the intersection, and what that does is it directs pedestrians and bicyclists to the nearest crossing, which is the sidewalk closed cross here signage that you see a little bit downstream of that. what this situation usually tries to do is, if you can't maintain a path that's as commensurate with what the pedestrian or bicyclists had before, then we want to get them out of the way of conflict, essentially. Conflict of moving vehicles, conflict of work zone traffic, and get them onto the other side of the street. It's always our intent to minimize the path that they have, the alternate path that they have to travel. And we always try to assign those folks back to a marked crossing, a legal marked crossing, and if possible, to a signalized crossing, the closest signalized crossing. Now, sometimes to be forthcoming, that's not possible because the closest signalized crossing is a ways off, but that is always the intent, to get folks back onto their preferred side of the street using available marked crosswalks. The bottom scenario is a sidewalk diversion, and that's when essentially they're taking some type of lane or curb lane or parking lane, and that becomes the walk path for the pedestrians or the bicyclists. That also kind of gets into something that we won't probably speak on too much here, but covered walkways and different features that are used, and that's when there's fallen debris and so forth. Next slide, please, Roy. And this is just an excerpt from our book of standards. And what that is guidance for work zone traffic control and construction activities along state roadways. Kind of speaks to the same thing that I was talking about with the other slide, and how we try to redirect paths, if possible, around the work zone. That kind of represents a block that's being closed, a sidewalk, and that folks would cross the street onto the other side of travel and then cross back to avoid the work zone. And that's kind of what's happening. Well, that was the intention for Wayne Avenue. Next slide, please, Ray. I'm going to speak a little bit about some enhancements that we implemented along Wayne Avenue, understanding the dynamic nature of the work zone out there. And these are tiered in the sense of these were temporal. In 2017, Wayne Avenue was conveyed to Montgomery, to SHA from Montgomery County. And at that time, the speed limit was reduced to 25 miles per hour. We understand some of the activities surrounding that, what 25 miles per hour means, and it kind of speaks to reduced severity if there were, unfortunately, a crash. In 2019, we had a lot of discussions with communities along the corridor, and we kind of listened and heard what they were telling us. And as a result of that feedback, we added some activity. What we did was we enlarged the speed limit signs, 36 by 36, just to make them a little bit more conspicuous. And we also reinforced the speed limits by installing flags. We put flags on top of the speed limits just to bring a little bit more awareness to conditions on the corridor at that time. Next slide, please, Ray. Another measure that we employed, and I believe that was recently employed again, were speed feedback trailers. So those aren't speed cameras, but what they are is they, when drivers pass by, it reports your speed limit and how fast you're going. So it's more about awareness, to bring awareness to speeding conditions along the corridor. So we deployed that. Usually when we do deploy speed trailers, it's for a few weeks, just to so people don't get fatigued and start to not comply with the speed limit. So those get deployed in several week durations, and we've done that on Wayne Avenue a few times, particularly near Dale Drive. Next slide, please, Roy. A couple other features that we implemented were wider edge lines, and that was more or less to try to bring some traffic calming features to Wayne Avenue, and just to reinforce some of those speed limits that we were reducing and some of the conditions that we were vying for out there. I can speak to the next slide too, because two elements did happen related to those. Right, next slide, please. And rumble strips, just to, again, a traffic calming feature. Now, both the wider edge lines and the rumble strips were raised, and that's because of the dynamic nature of Wayne Avenue and the moving parts with the maintenance of traffic. But it is every intent of us and the Purple Line to reinstall those once the project's complete. But why we took several slides to kind of go over some enhancements that may or may not be on the corridor right now, or because it kind of speaks to the fact that from a state highway standpoint and from a purple line standpoint, we are working together and we're trying to take measures, bring measures to go forward that we can enhance pedestrian and bicycle safety on the corridor as feasible. Next slide, please. And actually, I think that's the end of the slides there. So I'll stop there and get some feedback.
Great, thank you, Mr. Gunn. Members, please raise your hand or let me know if you have any questions. I see Delegate Corman. Before I turn to you, Delegate Corman, Mr. Gunn, I appreciate your graph of the standards and all of that, but one of the things that I've heard is that those are often not being met. So what sort of oversight is there, or compliance insurance, or I don't know the phrase, but what's being done to ensure that those standards will be met going forward?
Thank you, Delegate. Excuse me, I'm sorry. We kind of spoke a little bit about us having a coordination with our utility inspection team. So we have different inspectors for different coordinates for different areas. I think about 3 or 4 of our inspectors handle the purple line area or the alignments. What those folks do is they kind of traverse the corridors periodically, probably weekly, and they just kind of make sure that the conditions are being followed. The case with the Wayne Avenue, that was emergency work, so they didn't coordinate with us directly, actually, unfortunately. Excuse me, and they didn't reach out to our SOC, our State Operations Center, either. So I would like to hopefully make that the anomaly, not to say that that couldn't happen again, but hopefully that was the anomaly. Between our inspection team and the Purple Lines team, so we both have sets of inspectors who kind of look at the corridors. And between those groups, we try to capture any conditions that aren't being met on our corridor or any of the Purple Line alignment corridors.
Thank you. Delegate Corman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, Derek, let me just take this opportunity on behalf of the District 16 team to thank you for your participation on Friday and our off-topic but important Old Georgetown Road pedestrian safety walk. Really appreciated that. 2 questions for you. One, do you know the status of the access permit on 355 southbound, where they want to close the sidewalk in one of the lanes of car traffic?
Not handy, Delegate. And first, thank you for the comment about Friday. Not handy, but I can get that to you pretty quickly following the meeting.
Okay, I know it's been pending for quite a while. It might have been approved by now. They have public notification requirements that the requesting party has to meet, but SHA doesn't review those notices, right? You just sort of tell them, hey, you have to, meet your requirements.
More so the latter. So we have our minimum outreach requirements and kind of spoke to that with the 72 hours. And I think for another case, it's 48 hours that they have to contact us and let them know that there's forthcoming work. And again, with the Wayne Avenue, kind of going back to that as our prototype, that was not met. But more times than not, that they do reach out to us. There's a couple of mechanisms that they have to do that through, and that's our utility inspector and our State Operations Center. And just to put some layers on that. But and then we also send out to the public. This might not get to your question specifically, Delegate, but we also send out to the public through our district community liaison forthcoming lane closures for the area that goes through our DCL.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm quite familiar with that list. I get it, I guess, every week. But I'm asking about the ones that I guess, I don't know if it's the Maryland Transit Solutions or the PLTP or maybe it's MTA. They have an obligation themselves to do some kind of public notification. Isn't that right?
I'll maybe
jump in, Derek, on that one. So anytime we have lane closures, we plan to do extensive notification in advance. So yes, we do notifications regarding that stipulates what is going to happen and when it's going to happen, to alert the communities to when these happen.
Great, thank you. I mean, I'll just share that a very early one went out on the 55 closure, which I appreciate. I think early notice is good, but I would say it was also fairly inaccurate in what it was describing, which is obviously of concern. If I could ask one semi-related follow-up, Madam Chair.
Of course.
Great. So Derek, in your presentation, you said, I'm going to briefly mention covered walkways, but I don't think we'll be talking about that much. Why won't we be talking about that much? Why aren't we using covered walkways anywhere?
Understood. And we're kind of centering the presentation along Wayne Avenue. And I know that we've had a lot of they're not in play at Wayne Avenue right now. The reason I mention that is because our interaction with covered walkways right now it's been more on the developer side in some of your CBDs and places where there could be falling debris from high structures and so forth. So that's the only reason. Maybe that was a misworded delegate, but it's more or less where we've experienced covered walkways to date. It's been in downtown CBDs and dealing with high-rise structures that are being erected.
Yeah, I mean, just as you know from our years of interaction, to me, should be the standard, should be using a covered walkway. And whether you're building a subway in New York City or a skyscraper, they manage to keep their pedestrian ways open with covered walkways. And it's certainly the exception in our part of the world. And I still don't understand why, despite our years of interaction, but I appreciate the follow-up, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Corman. Other members? No. Okay, Delegate Charkoudian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Derek, for that presentation. I think the question, one of the questions that I have is related to one of the comments that Ray made earlier was about that there's few good options for safe crossing to choose from. And I think that's kind of this core issue that we're up against, is that we have state highways in general are built with few good crossings to choose from, with a full mile with no safe crossing in very, very dense areas that are transit dependent. And then when you close a section of that sidewalk, realistically, you're sending people an extra mile out of their way to cross at a safe crossing. And so I'll point to University Boulevard as an example of that. But again, I don't want to be site specific, because I continue to ask that MDOT and SHA and MTA actually build policies so that the solutions aren't dependent on people raising the issue with you, but that you're actually proactively solving the problem in advance. But in this example, there is a section of sidewalk closed that if somebody were to, it's at Carroll and University to roughly Bayfield, if someone were to cross at the safe crossings, they would walk an extra mile out of their way to get across to the other side of the street. So there's a bunch of random signs, I've been there recently, that say sidewalk closed, cross here. They seem to point into the neighborhood. Then there's some other random signs that say pedestrian detour that kind of go to nowhere. I'm not sure what's going on. Fortunately, I guess everybody's ignoring the signs because you can't actually follow them anywhere. But in the meantime, there's not safe crossings. And so there was one of the documents that you showed earlier, and I hope we can get the slide deck, talked about building the detours so that pedestrians aren't sort of tempted to or encouraged to cross mid-block crossings. But that's kind of exactly what's happening right there. And so I guess my question is, what are the, it might have been the next one. It wasn't utility permits. It was about the guidelines. Can you skip to the next one maybe? There it is. So it says, so that pedestrians are not confronted with mid-block work sites that will induce them to attempt skirting the work site or making a mid-block crossing. But this is sort of exactly what I think the work sites currently do. And I think that, so I think my request, it's clear to me that the standards right now do not create safety, at least in this one particular example. And I think it may be necessary for SHA to rethink how you create those detours and the guidance that you present, because when I talk to MTA and Purple Line about it, they say they're following your guidelines. I'm looking at your guidelines, I'm looking at the reality, at least in this particular neighborhood, and it's definitely not creating safety. And so it may be that your guidelines need to be revised, but something needs to happen so that your answer to me and to this community is not, yes, we expect you to then walk back to Piney Branch a half a mile, cross at Piney Branch, and then walk back to Carroll and then cross. So that cannot be the plan that you have for how you're keeping pedestrians safe here. And so I guess my request is, we've talked a little bit about, should people be walking through neighborhoods? And you've said you don't like to detour people through neighborhoods that aren't SHA roads. But what you leave them then with is the option to do a mid-block crossing, and that's just unacceptable. And so if the current pedestrian guidelines that you're giving to MTA and to Purple Line Transit Partners, the Purple Line concessionaire, if the current guidelines make it okay to do what we're seeing right now on University, but anybody could be seeing it anywhere along this construction, then I think the guidelines potentially need to be rewritten. And I'd like to ask you to speak to that.
Certainly. Thank you, Delegate. Thank you, Delegate Charcuti. And what I would say is two things related to that. So what we have up here is the MDOT SHA Book of Standards. And I extracted one, and at the bottom in the table, it says undivided for speeds greater than 40 miles per hour. Excuse me, I'm sorry, over 12 hours of nighttime use. So that wouldn't be directly applicable to Wayne Avenue, maybe more so to 193, but it's just a snapshot of a type of standard that we're looking at. I think it speaks a little bit broad brush, but essentially what it's trying to say is that we're looking for we're looking for two things. One, to replicate the existing path as best we can, depending on obstacles or if there's other factors that are a little bit, that we have to work through. But essentially in this case, it's very consistent that if there's a work zone or if there's a sidewalk there and we can't have them travel that same side, then we will put them on the other side. We're going to have them cross at a documented marked crosswalk. Even better, a signalized crosswalk if that's available and it's not, for example, 2 miles away from their destination. So we're looking for those opportunities. If in 193, for example, if that's not happening, I haven't been out there in about a week or so, I apologize. But if that's not happening, that's when our utility inspection team and the Purple Line folks have to go out there and make sure that the standards that we do have right now are being adhered to. And if that's not being complied to, then we have to make concessions on that side. So in terms of the book of standards or things that need to be upgraded, we can have a conversation with our Office of Traffic and Safety, and not just to have a discussion, but to really discuss needs in live work zones. And we can share that, there's some concerns about what this is telling us at the moment and kind of see what they say. But I think right now that the standards that we do have, it sounds like folks feel, or from what I'm hearing, that they're not being adhered to. So that's where our inspection team and Ray and me, we have to kind of get in the same room and make sure that we're traversing these corridors and keeping eyes on the conditions so that there is compliance at first, and then we can make adjustments as needed.
Madam Chair, can I ask a follow-up?
Yes, go ahead.
So with all due respect, I have been raising the issue of this particular spot at University and Carroll and Barron for about a month, and I have been told that it is adhering to your standards. And so that's why right now I'm suggesting that maybe your standards need to be changed, because I'm telling you that it is not safe. So again, I think there's two issues. One is this coordination, which we keep being told is now happening between SHA and MTA. I'm hearing you say maybe they weren't adhering to your standards. So that coordination perhaps is not happening at the level that it needs to be happening. Or if it is, and if this current arrangement at University is adhering to your standards, then the standards need to change.
Understood. And taking a step back, I guess just the way you were describing the conditions, it didn't seem like where the signage was kind of directing people to know where that's kind of what I was getting at there. But again, Ray, I'm just kind of getting a chance to know Ray for the first time based on our conversation the last couple of days. But I think he's committed to sitting down with me and the people that he needs to at SHA to make sure we do have the right conditions in place. And I can commit to you that will happen. From what I understand, there was a constructive utility meeting a little while back just to kind of get the contractors on board and let them know what their priorities are and what their responsibilities are. So if this isn't happening, then I think the right people are on the call right now, and we can kind of continue that dialogue and make sure that we're putting these measures in place from this point on.
Okay, we are just past the 2 o'clock hour, so I think we're going to wind down. I do understand that Delegate Moon has one more thing he would like to raise, and so I'll turn it to you, Delegate Moon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is, since we're all assembled here talking about this topic, I just want to put on your radar as you retool the Bonifant Street businesses continue to be dissatisfied with the level of warning, communication, and how that the particularly temporary re-engineering of that road looks and how it's communicated to the public. So if you could just make a point to circle back with them specifically on this, but also just as again, and just in this general matter, of course, of where the buck stops to, is just a gentle reminder. The small businesses are bleeding while these that over there in particular, it doesn't look appealing. So so there's got to be something better, but we can circle back on this, but while you're here, I just want to put it on your plate again.
Yeah, I can definitely reinforce that with our business engagement team to circle back with them and also alert them to everything. We understand how this is affecting the small businesses out there. So.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for your time and your engagement today. I think we all heard some encouraging things and also some questions and continuing concerns about oversight and coordination. I am sure this will not be the last conversation. So again, thank you everybody for your participation and engagement, and we look forward to seeing better pedestrian safety. All right. Have a great day.